It's easy to blame Kevin Stefanski for Shedeur Sanders' rookie struggles, but that's only part of the story. The bigger issue? An entire organization that's never quite figured out how to develop a young quarterback. Now that Stefanski's gone, the spotlight shifts squarely onto Cleveland's front office. Sanders showed flashes, game-breaking throws, toughness in pocket, command in key moments. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. What he didn't get was a system that trusted him. That's the challenge now. Can Cleveland finally commit to a quarterback the way successful franchises do, or will they stay stuck in a loop of resets and regrets? This isn't just another offseason. It's a crossroads. Sanders has already earned the faith of his teammates and the curiosity of the league. What he needs now is alignment, a coaching staff and front office ready to tailor the system to his strengths. The next hire will reveal everything about the Browns' direction. Choose right, and they could be building around the most promising quarterback they've had in years. Choose wrong, and it's back to square one. Again. The Cleveland Browns made headlines the moment they fired head coach Kevin Stefanski. After years of being seen as a steady hand in a chaotic organization, his dismissal didn't just end an era, it cracked the Browns wide open. And all eyes shifted directly to the young quarterback who somehow kept his head up through it all, Shedeur Sanders. Sanders walked into Cleveland with expectations already stacked against him. It wasn't just about his name or his college highlights. It was about becoming a guy in a franchise notorious for chewing through quarterbacks like snacks at a tailgate. Still, he gave fans reasons to believe. His throws were sharp. His poise was real. He didn't panic when plays broke down. Even with a losing record, there was something different about how Sanders carried himself. But let's not pretend it was smooth sailing. Shedeur's rookie season came with rough patches. 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions isn't what you call a breakout year. Critics were loud, but those numbers didn't tell the whole story. They didn't show the late-game drives where he nearly willed the offense to life, or the way he kept stepping up in a broken system that rarely put him in position to succeed. That's where the Stefanski problem comes in. He wasn't necessarily bad, just too cautious, too structured, and at times, too limiting for a quarterback like Sanders. Shedeur thrives when he can improvise, when the pocket collapses and instincts kick in. Stefanski's playbook didn't leave much room for that. It boxed Sanders in, and that tension simmered under the surface all season. Behind the scenes, there were murmurs. Stefanski, always professional at the mic, never directly criticized Sanders, but you could hear the strain, the carefully worded praise, the subtle deflections. It was like watching two people in a work relationship where neither wanted to admit they weren't clicking. Then came the end-of-season press conference, and that's when things shifted. For the first time, Stefanski spoke openly, if still diplomatically, about Shedeur. He said the team needed to be more dynamic and less hesitant at the quarterback position. It didn't take a decoder ring to figure out who that was aimed at. He was out the door, but he still made sure people knew how he felt about the rookie QBs. If Stefanski was disappointed, Sanders never let it show. Through every loss, every sack, every missed opportunity, he kept showing up. Teammates noticed. So did the fans. You could see it in post-game interviews. Players backing him up, talking about his leadership, his calm under pressure. That kind of respect isn't handed out in Cleveland. You have to earn it, and fast. There were moments that stuck out. Games where Sanders made throws that seemed impossible. Tight windows. Bullet passes on the run. Command in the huddle like he'd been doing it for years. That wasn't a system quarterback trying to survive. That was a franchise player waiting for the right coaching staff to set him free. Still, Cleveland being Cleveland, the question lingers. What now? Stefanski is gone. The coaching carousel has already started spinning. And the big unknown is whether the new regime sees Sanders as the answer or just another stopgap. This team has a history of quarterback resets. It's part of the Browns' DNA at this point. But there's a chance to break that cycle. The off-season is where that decision will be made. Draft talk is already loud. There are whispers about other QBs. But replacing Sanders now would be a signal that Cleveland hasn't learned anything, that they're still stuck chasing someone better instead of building around a talent they already have. Sanders isn't perfect, but he's shown enough to earn a second year, and more importantly, the right support. Stefanski's last few press conferences hinted at frustration about the offense not clicking, about red zone inefficiency. He never said Sanders' name directly, but the implication was clear. He wanted more, and didn't think Sanders could give it. At least not yet. Whether that was fair is another debate. But what it definitely was, short-sighted. Because when you dig into the film, the issue wasn't Sanders' ceiling. It was how low the staff kept the roof. The offense didn't lean into his strengths. There was no tempo, no rhythm, no design chaos. Just rigid schemes and hesitation. Stefanski played it safe, and Sanders paid the price. Through it all, Sanders never pointed fingers. He stayed focused, answered tough questions, and didn't throw anyone under the bus. That kind of maturity matters, especially in a locker room that's seen its share of drama. It's rare to see a rookie handle dysfunction with that much grace. And it earned him credibility beyond the stat sheet. Reporters started to notice it too. You'd hear the tone shift in media scrums. Less about numbers, more about presence. Sanders wasn't just surviving the NFL. He was adjusting to it like a pro. Sure, the turnovers hurt, but they didn't shake him, and that's a trait you can't coach. His response to Stefanski's departure was exactly what you'd expect, measured, respectful, and focused on the future. He said he was grateful for the opportunity and excited for what's next. No jabs. No passive aggression, just confidence. That quiet, grounded confidence is part of what's kept fans rooting for him. And now, the front office has to decide whether to root for him too. There's a window here, narrow but real, to give Sanders the weapons, line protection, and creative system he needs to thrive. Not just exist, not just survive, thrive. If Cleveland pulls it off, Sanders could become something this franchise hasn't had in decades, a real identity. A quarterback who doesn't just start, but leads. One the team rallies behind. And one the league actually fears. But they've got to get it right. The head coach hire isn't just about X's and O's. It's about chemistry, trust. Someone who sees Sanders not as a project, but as a centerpiece. A leader worth betting on. Because if they don't see that, they'll be right back here next January, wondering why the offense never clicked, and why another promising QB walked out the door with nothing to show for it. For all his faults, Stefanski did stabilize the Browns for a while, but he also clung to control. He managed quarterbacks instead of empowering them, and that's where his tenure ended, with a quarterback who needed freedom and a coach who just couldn't give it. Sanders needs the opposite, a coach willing to trust his instincts, to embrace the occasional chaos in exchange for brilliance. Because when you got a player who can extend plays, lead under pressure, and command a room as a rookie, you don't hold him back. You build around him. The Browns fan base has been through enough quarterback drama to fill a mini-series. Every few seasons, there's a new face, a new promise, and a new excuse when it doesn't work. But with Shedeur Sanders, the narrative feels different. Not because of hype, but because of grit. Because through every blown coverage, busted play, and drive that ended short, Sanders kept showing up with fire in his chest. What set him apart wasn't just a highlight throw here and there. It was how often he turned what should have been dead plays into something meaningful. He didn't need everything to be perfect. He just needed the ball in his hands and the clock ticking. And in those moments, you could tell this wasn't just another Browns quarterback. This was someone who actually believed he could flip the script. But belief only takes you so far when the system keeps boxing you in. Stefanski's offense was built to limit mistakes, not maximize upside. Every snap was a chess move, controlled, deliberate, and at times painfully slow. That works for a seasoned vet. It suffocates a dynamic rookie. Sanders didn't just need reps. He needed trust, and he didn't get enough of either. This team leaned into fear. Fear of turnovers. Fear of losing control. And that fear cost him explosiveness. It turned a quarterback with arm talent and improvisational instincts into someone asked to play small ball football. It wasn't just frustrating to watch. It was regressive. Post-game interviews became predictable. Stefanski would talk about execution and details, but rarely about vision. There was no acknowledgement of what Sanders did right, only what needed cleaning up. And when the season ended, Stefanski's final words carried a tone that stuck with fans, a quiet, buried frustration that suggested he didn't think Sanders was ready to lead. But here's the problem. Leadership doesn't always show up on a stat sheet, and readiness isn't measured by whether you followed every rule in the playbook. Sometimes it's about presence, and Sanders had that from day one. Even in losses, especially in losses, Sanders looked like someone unfazed by the noise, like someone who knew this wasn't the peak of his game, just the beginning. That Raiders game, the numbers weren't dazzling, but the moments were everything. Late in the third quarter, the Browns were down, the offense stagnant and the fan base restless. But Sanders stayed locked in. He moved the pocket, found space where there was none, and delivered strikes that gave the team life. They didn't win, but it wasn't for lack of fight. That's the game people pointed to when they said, "He's got it." He knew what was at stake, not just his career, but the direction of a franchise on the verge of another rebuild or a breakthrough. In interviews, Sanders always brought the focus back to the team. No me-first energy, just a clear message. He wanted to win, and he wanted to do it in Cleveland. That attitude resonated with veterans, with fans, with analysts who'd spent years watching Browns quarterbacks flame out mentally and physically. Sanders wasn't putting up Pro Bowl numbers, but he was doing something just as valuable. He was earning trust. When the Stefanski firing dropped, Sanders didn't make it about himself. He talked about respecting the coach, learning from the experience, and staying ready for whatever came next. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't defensive. He was focused. It's that clarity, under pressure, amid chaos, that gives people hope. That maybe this time, the Browns don't need to hit the reset button. Maybe this time, they already have the guy. They just need to build around him. Stefanski's biggest flaw wasn't excess NOS. It was timing. He never adapted to the quarterback he had. He tried to fit Sanders into a scheme built for someone else. And when that didn't work, he tightened the reins instead of rethinking the system. That rigidity is what finally did him in. Ironically, Stefanski helped stabilize a team known for dysfunction, only to be undone by his own unwillingness to embrace unpredictability. The NFL isn't about perfection anymore. It's about playmakers. And he had one. He just couldn't see it. One of Sanders' best performances came against Cincinnati. The stats were fine, but the energy? That was different. He walked onto the field with confidence, like he had something to prove. And by the end of the game, even Bengals defenders were giving him nods of respect. He wasn't afraid of the moment. He welcomed it. And that's the difference between a quarterback playing not to lose and one who wants to take the game. NFL match compilation. Through it all, the biggest takeaway from Sanders' rookie year wasn't a single throw or highlight reel. It was the body of work, the way he showed up week after week while everything around him shifted. New personnel, injuries, system constraints, media speculation. He dealt with all of it, and he still kept going. No meltdowns, no excuses, just work. That's what leaders do. They show up even when the results don't. They hold the line when everything else feels unstable. Now, the Browns front office stands at a fork in the road. They can keep chasing potential through the draft, hoping the next guy is the one. Or they can look at what they already have. A quarterback who's shown resilience, adaptability, and flashes of true playmaking ability, and double down. There's no guarantee. That's the nature of football. But if you've got someone who's earned the respect of a locker room, who's handled pressure with poise, and who's made progress in a system that didn't even suit him, you don't toss that aside. You lean in. You could feel it throughout the season. Whispers turning into questions. Questions turning into debates. Was Shedeur Sanders a real deal, or just another flash in Cleveland's cursed quarterback pan? The numbers were modest. But the eye test? The energy? That told a completely different story. Every time Sanders took the field, it felt like the Browns had a chance. Not a guarantee. Not a blowout. Just a chance. And for a team that spent years losing games before halftime, that meant something. His confidence never wavered, and neither did his command. But the coaching didn't match that energy. Kevin Stefanski, for all his composure, coached scared. He leaned into conservative schemes, even when the moment demanded boldness, especially when Sanders showed he was ready to take risks. Stefanski's fear of mistakes turned into a system that overcorrected, and that system kept the offense stuck in neutral. You saw it in critical downs, third and long, red zone chances, where Stefanski's calls seemed more focused on avoiding disaster than chasing opportunity. Sanders was asked to color inside the lines when he was clearly capable of painting outside them, and that disconnect played out all season. Sanders never publicly challenged the staff, but his post-game tone said plenty. You could hear the restraint. He'd answer questions about offensive rhythm or game planning with careful words like, "We're working on it," or "It's a process." That's athlete speak for, "This system isn't helping me." But instead of blowing up or checking out, he just kept showing up. That kind of maturity, especially in a pressure cooker like Cleveland, can't be overstated. Sanders proved he could handle losing, handle criticism, and still stay locked in. That's the stuff coaches say they want, until it challenges their control. The turning point wasn't one single play or game. It was a steady accumulation of missed opportunities, close losses, red zone stalls, drives that fizzled not because Sanders failed, but because the game plan never gave him full control. It was a death by 1,000 hesitations. Fans started noticing. Local media picked up on it too. The problem wasn't the quarterback. It was the playbook. A playbook designed to minimize mistakes instead of maximizing potential. And in the modern NFL, that's a losing strategy. That philosophy was exposed in the Raiders game. The defense gave Sanders short fields. The energy in the stadium was electric, but the offense crawled. Not because Sanders lacked the talent, but because the coaching kept pulling back the reins. Every time the team built momentum, a screen pass or conservative run call would kill the drive. You could see Sanders frustrated, not outwardly, but in the subtle ways. The extra second before the huddle, the glance to the sideline after a 3-and-out. He knew he had more to give. He just wasn't being asked to. Still, he stayed composed. He didn't unravel. If anything, he got sharper, cleaner. The interceptions dropped, the sacks decreased, and his timing improved. That kind of development in a system that rarely let him cook says a lot. It shows he's coachable, but not dependent. He can grow, but he also knows when the structure around him is holding him back. That's the fine line that separates good quarterbacks from franchise ones. And Sanders is towing that line like a pro. When Stefanski addressed the end of the season, his words were professional but distant. He said the team needs to be more explosive and that they left too much on the field. But never once did he take accountability for how tightly he ran the offense. That's where the leadership gap was clearest. Sanders owned his mistakes all year. Stefanski rarely owned the system. And in the end, that cost in the locker room. Because players talk. They know when a guy is doing everything he can inside a limited structure. They know when the issue isn't the guy taking snaps. It's the one calling them. In the Bengals matchup, the contrast was obvious. Sanders came out aggressive, confident, letting it rip. There were broken plays where he rolled out and made something from nothing. Deep shots that nearly connected. It wasn't flawless, but it was fearless, and it gave the Browns a fighting chance. But after halftime, the game plan shrank again. Quick outs, designed runs, no tempo. That second-half regression mirrored the season itself. Sanders would get rolling, then be pulled back by design. And in a game where momentum is everything, that hesitation killed them. The Browns don't just need a new coach, they need a new mindset. One that doesn't just see Sanders as a puzzle piece, but as a foundation. That means adjusting the scheme to his strengths, giving him a tempo offense, building in movement, taking calculated risks. Because this league doesn't reward safe anymore. It rewards bold. And if Cleveland doesn't step into that, someone else will. And Sanders, in the right hands, could easily become one of those "how do we let him go" stories. He hasn't asked for anything publicly, not a vote of confidence, not a demand for a new scheme. But the way he talks about next season, he's ready, he's preparing like he's the guy. And unless the Browns make a catastrophic decision, he should be. Leadership isn't about yelling the loudest or making the flashiest play. It's about consistency, about being the same person in week 1 as you are in week 17. Sanders has been that, and the road ahead isn't guaranteed. That's the truth in this league. Talent isn't enough. Timing matters. Fit matters. And for Shedeur Sanders, this offseason could be the difference between becoming Cleveland's franchise cornerstone or another name on a long list of almosts. But if you've been paying attention, there's reason to believe this one's different. Because while the system crumbled around him, Sanders never folded. He never lost a room. He stayed accountable, stayed calm, and stayed focused. That's what future leaders look like. Not just because they want the spotlight, but because they're built for it. The Browns have spent decades searching for that kind of presence. It's right in front of them. The only question now is whether they'll build around it or watch someone else do it better. Sanders doesn't need the franchise to coddle him. He needs it to believe in him. Back him with the right staff. Scheme to his strengths. Surround him with weapons. And then let him go to work. Because when he's trusted, he delivers. And when he delivers, he inspires. And when a young quarterback inspires a locker room in Cleveland, that's not just rare, that's historic. So what's it going to be? Another reset? Another wasted opportunity? Or is this finally the moment Cleveland stops searching and starts building? If you want to see how this plays out, and you're just as curious as the rest of us to see what Shedeur Sanders becomes a real shot, go ahead and like the video. Drop your take in the comments, especially if you think the Browns are about to mess this up again. And hit subscribe so you don't miss whatever chaos comes next. Because if this offseason is anything like this season, we're in for a ride.